So here's my deal. Thank you for that, by the way. I'm backwards. I love to draw. Now, judging by my masterpiece, I'm not terribly good at it. But I don't care, because the very feel of pen or pencil on paper is something that I cherish over and above the result. And I think we all start that way. Hand a box of crayons to a group of toddlers, and other than the few geniuses that eat them, gifted kids aside, you'll find that they'll scribble away completely content without any idea at all that they're no good at it. They simply love what I love, which is the process. Right? And then around the age of 7 or 8, we become critical of our work. It starts when other people judge it. We judge it. The process starts to take a back seat to the result. And at this critical time, when we're trying to figure this stuff out, without proper guidance, a lot of us get frustrated and intimidated, and we quit. And we've even developed this narrative, this false narrative, to get us over this hump. And this narrative tells us that creative expression is something that's only for those few lucky enough to be born talented. Yeah? We've all heard that, like you're born to it. It's either something you either have or you don't have. And this, to me, this does a disservice in two ways. One, it completely devalues the hard work that went in, that somebody put in to becoming truly great at what they do. And two, it gives the rest of us an out. It gives the rest of us a reason not to try. So often I'll be like sketching in public. Again, I'm not good at it, so that's very courageous of me. Thank you very much. And people come to me all the time and they say to me, like, they'll say, oh man, I used to love to draw. And I say, well, why did you quit? And they say, oh, I wasn't any good at it. Clearly. They say, I wasn't born with any talent. But the best one, people come to me and go, oh, I'd give anything if I knew how to draw. And I'm like, anything? Anything but draw? I would strip down naked and squat into a bowl of hot sauce for 4 hours if I could draw at the end of it. What? You just have to draw. And to me, that's a result-based idea. That just tells me that people want to be good at stuff right out of the gate. And if they're not good at something right out of the gate, they blame genetics. Right? I have a lot to blame genetics for, but that's not one of them. Now, as was stated in my introduction, which took all my best bits, by the way, I'm an animator and a visual effects artist. And I've been really, really fortunate to work on some pretty cool films with some really, really enormously talented people. And I think why this is interesting, because it's not really interesting, but I think what makes it interesting for me is because growing up a talentless, chubby kid on a remote farm in Western Canada, I had no right to think that someday I could work alongside some of these creative giants. And it makes me think of something that my mother said to me when I was still quite young. She said, you seem like somebody who thinks he has something to say. Clearly. Thanks, Mom. But she said, from as long as I can remember, you've been looking for ways to say it. And I think that's true, but I don't think that's unique. I think we all, regardless of what we do in our lives, I think we're all looking to express ourselves creatively. We all feel better when we can express ourselves creatively. We feel right, I think. So my parents, sort of recognizing this, thinking that maybe I have something to say, plucked me off the farm when I was 9, and they stuck me in music lessons, guitar lessons to be specific. And my guitar teacher was an interesting fellow. There was two things he really didn't like. He didn't like people who didn't know how to play guitar, and he didn't like 9-year-old boys. It was a terrible combination for me, personally. And I remember one of the last times I saw him, if not the last time I saw him, he grew so frustrated with how bad I was at this that he hit me across the head so hard that I was sent tumbling off my chair and onto the floor. And don't feel bad. I probably had it coming. It was the 70s. Hitting kids was like page 5 of What to Expect and You're Expecting, I think. But I don't know. I never read that book. I only have 4 kids. I'll read it on my 5th. But as I lay there on the floor with this chair wrapped around my legs and looking up at this guy who was still yelling at me, I remember thinking to myself, and I remember this actually really clearly, I remember thinking to myself, I guess I wasn't born with any talent. Shit. That sucks, because it's over for me. And as strange as that sounds for a 9-year-old kid to sort of buy into, that's what I was told. That's exactly what I was told. You don't have any talent. Don't worry about it. Don't feel bad. A lot of people don't have any talent. Don't feel bad. But I did feel bad. I felt really, really bad. And it bothered me for a long time. So when I was 18, I picked it back up again. I needed to square this circle. I couldn't imagine that I didn't have the genetic components to learn how to play a guitar. I had my hands, I had my fingers. Hell, I've seen a guy on the internet play with his feet. Really, really well with his feet. I'm thinking, if this guy can do that with his feet, clearly I can play Oh Susanna with my hands. So I picked it back up and I started to play it. And lo and behold, my old, crotchety old guitar teacher was right. I didn't have any talent. I was terrible. I was really, really bad, obviously. I could take a punch, but I couldn't play guitar. So I didn't care. At that time, as long as anybody wasn't smacking me, I kind of enjoyed playing the thing. So I kept playing it. And I found this, this equation of if I play it a little bit, I get a little bit better. If I play it a lot, I get a little bit better a little bit sooner. And I kept playing, and I kept playing, and I was hooked on it, and I really liked to do it. And after a few years, I found myself in the company of people who were really good at it, and they took me on board, and I was on the road, playing music, cashing paychecks as a professional musician. That's me on the far left in the shorts. I could have used a stylist, I guess. If you zoom in on my face, I probably look like this. But there I was. I was living in a tour bus. I was making records. We were selling records. I was flicking guitar picks at people who seemed to like it. Some of them flicked them back. Probably the ones that ate the crayons. I don't know. But for the first time in my life, I found myself surrounded by people who truly excelled at the creative process. And I started to notice this common thread. And that thread was those who did it the most did it the best. It was simple. And to do it the most, you got to love the process of doing it. These weren't people who were necessarily genetically gifted. These were people who, like me, loved what I loved, which was the process. Now, after a few years of that, I had a couple of itches I still wanted to scratch. One, I wanted to start a family, and I didn't want to do it in a tour bus, which is ironic because the act of starting a family is a favorite pastime of a tour bus. So I hear. And two, I wanted to get back to drawing, but more specifically, I wanted to see my drawings move. So I cashed in my chips, and I enrolled in an animation school. And again, I had good intentions, but again, it was a disaster because again, I had no talent. But this one kind of surprised me because I thought I would. For months and months and months, the only feedback I got from my considerable efforts is that I was surprisingly bad at something I really thought I'd be good at something that I needed to be good at. I was in my 30s. I had started a family. The stakes were high. My shortcomings were magnified. Suddenly the result was all that matters. And for the first time ever in my life, I hated drawing. was a drag. And then something interesting happened. I got a grade. I handed this assignment that I truly liked. I enjoyed the process of animating this particular assignment, and a couple days later it came back to me and had a big C- on it. And I looked at that thing and it dawned on me that this isn't giving me any information at all to help me get better at this. All this thing is doing is reaffirming what I already know, is that I stink. But there's no actual information. The worst thing that it does is it takes my love of the process and it throws it away and it slams my focus on the result and the result only, which is the last thing I needed. So I recognized this and I approached my instructors and I said, I don't want to see it. Don't care, don't want to see it, keep it to yourself. And they did, funny enough. And after that, I kind of relaxed a little bit. I got into a groove. And I got back to the process. I got back to enjoying what I liked about drawing. And after a few months, I graduated. I didn't finish well, lower third of my class, but I didn't care because I was enjoying myself. And a few months after that, I landed a job working on a film, the only one of all the graduates actually at the time, which is interesting considering I finished so low, but I was the only one to land a job as an animator on a feature film. Now, it was Garfield, but it's still a film. And once again, I found myself in the company of people who truly excelled at what they did. Once again, I found the old equation of those who do it the most do it the best. And once again, I found myself in the company of people who simply loved what I loved, which was, say it with me?
The process.
Oh, you guys are great. And it's important that you love the process when you're working on like the 15th Dr. Dolittle or whatever the hell it is. Now, after all this, what I've learned is that careers in the arts are super, super tricky, right? They're a long shot. Unless your work is compelling. If people are compelled to pay attention to your work, you can do anything. That's the trick. That's the ticket. And what I've learned is that compelling work starts and ends with the intimate relationship that we have with our craft. It's not just being good at something. It's an authenticity born of years of frustration that can only be sustained by our love for the process. That, and that only, is the honesty and the authenticity that causes and compels people to pause and to pay attention. Now, amongst other things, I teach. I teach animation to university students and to online students, to anybody who will listen, and even to those who don't. And they come to me for all sorts of different reasons. Some of them are there because they really liked Finding Nemo, or World of Warcraft, or whatever it is. Some of them are there because they don't know what they want to do with their lives, but this looks kind of cool, and it looks kind of cool. And a few of them are there because they have something to say, and this is the way they choose to say it. But all of them sit down in front of a computer and they open the software and it's gray and it looks like math. It doesn't look anything like Finding Nemo or Frozen. And as I watch the color drain from their faces and their shoulders slump to the floor because this isn't what they thought it would be, I realize after everything that I've learned that my job, my only job as a teacher, is to simply peddle enthusiasm for the process. So, I ask you tonight, what would you do if the result didn't matter? We all got something, right? We all have something. Maybe it's a blank sketchbook in your bookshelf that you bought, and now you're afraid to open it because of what it says about you. Maybe it's a notebook because you had something that you wanted to say, you weren't sure how to say it, so you bought it because you wanted to express yourself. Maybe it's a musical instrument collecting dust in the back of your closet. I say dust it off. Not to be good at it, because you won't be. But make it your task to silence that voice in your head that tells you that it doesn't matter, don't do it if you're not good at it, that it's stupid, that it's a waste of time, and instead challenge yourself to channel that child, the child you once were, who didn't care what something looked like, who didn't care what something sounds like, who only cared what something felt like. Yeah? I say, let's put the result in the back seat and give the process the respect it deserves. Thank you.